Thanks for being part of this conference this week. Your participation is what is making it real and happen. So thank you so much. I am Dani Delani. I'm the Business and Transition Program Coordinator at ANCA. I'm going to quickly share my screen because, as we all love to do, we want to just take a moment and thank our sponsors. So today we are brought to you by the Community Bank, NA, Glens Falls National Bank and Trust Company, and the support, love, education, and immensely important work of the SBDC, specifically the SUNY Canton SBDC at Clinton Community College, who's helping us with a number of these programs today and throughout the week. The Center for Businesses in Transition is supported in part by the Northern Border Regional Commission, which is a federal agency that helps grant money to this wonderful partnership. And what is this partnership? What are we doing? Thousands of Adirondack North Country businesses are becoming available as business owners are reaching retirement age or thinking about career changes, especially after last year. A lot of people are just changing their plans, changing their lives up. So aspiring entrepreneurs like you are seeking opportunities to own a business. So here we are, right? Making the most of it, making some connections. This event, this whole week, is designed to be a learning opportunity for aspiring entrepreneurs to take over North Country businesses. An opportunity to empower those who live here and those who want to live here to realize their dreams of business ownership. It's not just for people who live in our backyard. It's not just for folks who live somewhere else. This is for everyone. And we really are excited to be able to present this information to you and get to know you this week. The Center for Businesses in Transition is a dynamic partnership between regional organizations and individuals invested in the retention and future of our communities and our businesses. You know, it's one thing if you have a pizza shop that closes in a big urban area, but when you have it in a rural town where there's only 3 restaurants, it can be a huge hit to the community. We want to keep those businesses open. We want to keep our small towns alive. Our goal is to help business owners sell their businesses on the open market, complete intergenerational family transfers, and look at other kinds of business ownership models like worker ownership or cooperatives. We're not real estate agents. We're not business brokers. We can't be your accountants. We can't be your lawyer. Like, those are not our jobs. But we're here to serve you, our communities, and help connect you to free and low-cost resources. At this time, we ask all of our Cbit Liaisons. These are Chamber of Commerce leaders, IDA leaders, economic development leaders, community leaders throughout the 14-county North Country region who are working day in and day out on this project. We ask all of our liaisons who are on this call to introduce yourself in the chat. If you could just go ahead and do that and put in your contact information. If folks would like to reach out to them, they're ready to take your call, and they're looking forward to connecting. Any of these individuals can answer questions for you. ANCA, I work at ANCA, so we've talked about Cbit, we talked about ANCA. ANCA helps coordinate this partnership. Here at ANCA, we're focused on growing a new economy in the 14 counties, an economy that works for all, a new economy that works for all, not just a few. We focus on food systems, energy, and entrepreneurial programs as well. If you're interested in supporting our work, you might want to consider becoming a member. We'll send out some information about that later. In addition, we're really excited to announce that this year we are starting a down payment assistance forgiveness program that will help address the lack of capital that is available for low to moderate income folks and folks who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are looking to take over an existing business. The goal for our first year is to raise $30,000 towards transitioning business owners in those demographics to help make their business dreams a reality. We're accepting donations now, and information about that program will be sent to you after the conference. Please keep a lookout for it. So here we are, ready to rock and roll, ready for this session, presenting yourself as a viable successor. What can you learn from a professional recruiter about making a good first impression with business owners? So right after this session, we're going to be speed networking with business owners, about 20 business owners throughout the North Country who are ready to retire and have done the work to talk to you and present themselves to you. So what can you do in that next session or in these next conversations to make sure that you're ready to have that conversation and to make sure that you present yourself in the best light possible? Today we have Joe Shoemaker from Fathom Recruitment. He's our guest speaker today. We're going to have a conversation, really relaxed. Joe's represented top talent, solving clients' talent acquisition needs for years. He used to work for Norsk Titanium, which is a huge deal. If you don't know about them, look them up. And he lives and works in Saranac Lake. He's super involved in the community. He's the chamber board president. He's a dad. He's an awesome person. I'm proud to call him my neighbor. So Joe, welcome. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Dani. I'm pumped to be here.
What did I not say about your bio or you as a person that people should know about you?
I mean, I think you hit it on the head. I kind of fell into recruitment because I'm like a hyper networker. I think everyone has a superpower, and mine's always been hyper networking. And so I think this is a really cool opportunity to hopefully share what I've learned with you great people and help, establish really good connections. Like Dani, I have a passion for helping the North Country succeed. And the only way that's going to happen is if we continue to work together to move our organizations forward. So.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here. You're a recruiter for different companies. And can you explain what that work looks like just for folks who might not know?
Yeah. So basically organizations, a lot of times, here in the North Country specifically, struggle to find specific skill sets to come join their teams. So they may have a great HR team, that keeps track of, all of their internal processes, but having someone who really focuses on identifying top talent, encouraging them to make a connection with a current business and ultimately, try to encourage them to come up and interview and ultimately get hired and become a long-term solution for my clients, as well as obviously my candidates that are coming in and their families and anyone else who's affected by that relocation, if that's not someone who's, local. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking to these folks all the time about kind of putting their best foot forward to a new employer, whether taking over an existing business isn't really that different, right? It's somebody who has got to believe in you and who wants to make a long-term partnership with you. So what sort of high-level ideas do you have that would help people put themselves forward in that and to be the best candidate for taking over a business?
That's a really good question. So when it comes to, I've recruited C-level individuals for very successful companies up here. And one thing that I've noticed is that the higher the level of the position, the more emotionally invested the employer is. And I can't imagine it being any more emotional than having someone take your child they've essentially been nurturing for years and putting their blood, sweat, and tears into bringing to the level that it is, and then handing that off to someone. So I think the most important thing I would say is to try to build synergy with, with that person. And I know that first conversation, there's not really a lot of knowns, but what it boils down to at the end of the day, the biggest truth bomb that I can come up with is you're going to spend at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with this individual in close quarters. So even though you may be on paper the most qualified person for this role, if there isn't synergy between you and the team you're going to be working with, that is just not a recipe for success. So it's important to build that early on in the conversations.
That's great. And that's a great point, I think, in taking over a business or taking a job, right? So a lot of folks get really nervous about that first interaction, right? With a business owner. What advice would you give to someone who wants to make a good first impression? That first moment of being a little nervous or wanting to talk to a business owner?
Yeah, I would make sure that you're well prepared for that conversation. Do whatever you can to learn more about the history of the company. Where did it start from? Is this owner the original owner? Did they inherit this, or, was this some other business that kind of morphed into what it is today? And also find out more is what you can about that ownership. Do they have an online presence anywhere? Are they on social media sites like LinkedIn or whatever you can, Google search, try to do what you can to find out what makes them tick on a personal level, because I think that will drive a lot of the professional decisions that they're making. And the more information you can equip yourself with before those conversations take place, the more comfortable you're going to find yourself in the moment and the more natural that conversation is going to be.
That's great. One of the things that we had talked about sort of in preparation for this conversation was about making sure that when you're asking those kind of questions that you're keeping them in the positive, right? That you're asking questions not necessarily about about struggles that the business owner has had, but like what they've done to make it this far successful. Can you speak to that a little bit about keeping that sort of optimism as part of the conversation?
Yeah. So instead of, one thing that I've learned is instead of asking what went wrong, if you could start over and, if you were to do it again today, what would you do differently? Which is a very nice way of saying what didn't go well. And that's ultimately, because really that's going to tell you a lot about the playbook that you're going to inherit going forward. So if you can get that information early on, I think that again will help set you up for success going forward.
What are other questions you'd ask? So you're in a aspiring business owner's shoes. What other questions would you ask?
One of my favorite questions, and it doesn't even have to be for a business ownership, but just in an interview in general, is what would I need to accomplish in the first 3 to 6 months for you to know that I was the right choice? And that is really a good question too, because it keeps everything positive, and they're essentially going to tell you the playbook on how they see the future of their organization if they're going to hang on to those reins. So I think that's a really good question. I actually had a client here in Saranac Lake who had a great conversation, because it's a small company. They're growing rapidly. They're very successful, and they want very ambitious teammates to join them. One of the concerns that employers have with ambitious people is a lot of times they want to change the way the business is done because they want to put their fingerprints on it, which is absolutely not a fault to have. They hit it right out of the gate with, this is the way we do it. If you have better ways of doing it, write it down. And after you've been here for a year, we'll talk about it. But until then, you're going to find that our processes work really well when you embrace them. And in a year, if you still don't believe this is the best way, then let's visit your ideas, which I thought was a really nice way of saying, we're not going to, start from scratch on day one. We're going to maneuver ourselves into that position. We'll have that conversation later, but let's be in data absorption mode right out of the gate to make sure that everybody's, successful starting out.
That's so transferable to business transitions too. We have one business owner from that took over a restaurant outside of Malone, New York, called The Pines. And a lot of the folks that come in there are corrections officers or locals, and they come for lunch and they get 2 Michigans. And if you're not around here, that's a kind of hot dog. And Chris Beebe, he's the owner. He wanted to change the menu. He wants to do dinner. He wants to make it a much more not upscale joint, not super fancy, but just have more of a variety and like really play into his strengths as a chef. But do you think he left those Michigans on the menu? Oh, heck yeah, he did. Why would he lose half the clients he has day one starting it, And so he's been really strategic and thoughtful about that. And I think it's a good example of that, not changing everything right away and like seeing what the strategy or the playbook, as you say, is to get you started and make changes little by little. That's great. What wouldn't you ask? What wouldn't you ask a business owner in that first conversation?
Yeah. There's a lot of landmines. Obviously, I wouldn't talk about, the success of the business, like dollars and cents. That's definitely not the time. I would want to know more about the internal workings of the business. Like, what's the passion? Business ownership is great when it's good and it's awful when it's bad. So what I would want to really kind of dive into learning more about how, what pushes them through those dark days without asking them that question outright. So I would just, I would want to just see where the conversation goes. I definitely wouldn't ask, like you said, any negative questions, like what's the worst decision you've ever made in a business? Although maybe like future conversations that might be appropriate, but definitely not day one. Yeah, that's a good one.
All right. So you talked a lot about synergy, right? Like you're really feeling like you're on the same path or the same wavelength with a business owner or not. Like, so say you meet a business owner, you've had a few conversations, you're like, this is really just not for me. And I think that sometimes people are like, don't want to have that conversation because they don't want to end up at the conversation where they have to say, this isn't for me. But there are ways to talk about that in a really positive way, or ways to sort of break off that relationship gently. Do you have some suggestions for that? I'm sure some of the folks that, you've recruited for other jobs have had to have that, oh, this was great, but not for me
Right.
conversation.
It's like breaking up with a a partner that you've been with for years. It feels very emotionally charged. I would suggest that in that moment, I would feed it as a sandwich. I know, which sounds silly, but it's memorable for me. You want to give good news, then you deliver the bad news, and then you close it up with some good news. So it sounds like you've had a great business. Unfortunately, this doesn't feel like a good fit for me, but with the future plans that you have coming up, I'm confident you're going to find someone who's going to be great and meet all your needs. Or something along those lines where it's, good news, not so good news, good news.
I love that. One of the other suggestions that you had when we were talking about this ahead of time was to recommend somebody else I thought that was a great that not leave them hanging. This may not be for me, but here's a friend that might be interested too. I love that bit of
one of the things I do if I reach out to someone and because their profile is great, but they're not interested in the location or whatever, is my quick response is completely understand. Great people know other great people. Who do you know that should be considered for this? Which it's it's very relevant. And if you could kind of pass them off to someone else, one, they're going to have a great experience working with you because you've given them nothing but positive feedback. And although you weren't the solution they were looking for, you're going to help them try to find that. So even if that doesn't go anywhere, you're still in trying to solve problems, which at the end of the day we're all trying to do. Right.
I love that. I love it. So you talk to lots of folks too who are maybe moving here or have moved here to take a position, right? What are people surprised by when they move here? What do you tell them about that relocation experience? Not everybody on the call today will be relocating, but for some folks that might be relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So we touch on the company, obviously the history, the role, what to expect business wise, and if there's synergy in that conversation. It's a quick pivot to talk about, weather is what will run most great people out of the North Country. And it's not that it's bad, it's just they weren't expecting it. And if you can kind of head that conversation up early, that's a big one. Also, cost of living is another one. If someone's coming from Brooklyn to the North Country, they may be thinking that the whatever the salary they're going to be having is a non-livable wage just because they've been in a super overpriced market. I don't get paid for this, but there's a website called bestplaces.net that I really, really enjoy. It breaks down, you can do a city to city comparison for cost of living, and it's not just dollars to dollars, but actually breaks down the key indicators on cost of living for, the median household expense, healthcare, utilities, all of the expenses that you would expect to look at if you were looking to relocate to an area you're not comfortable with. And you can do a dollar to dollar comparison. So it's a resource that I found to be really helpful.
That's great. That's a great piece of advice. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things, what other things should be thinking about if somebody's relocating? Is it, what if they're bringing their family here or things like that?
Yep, families are a big deal. There's definitely, I refer to them as spouses in tow, because a lot of times that if you have a professional couple, there's one that's leading the charge and the other one's just trying to scratch together a living wherever they get towed to. And there are some great opportunities up here, and there's some really good resources to help identify that as well. That's been a big challenge too, especially if you have two, high-powered individuals who both have careers that are very successful. A lot of times it can be a challenge. But like I said, there's definitely a lot of resources up here for that. And the North Country is booming. There's a lot happening up here, and even on the heels of a pandemic, there's some folks that are definitely negatively affected, but for the most part, it seems like everybody's really doing a great job in business up here right now.
That's great. Joe, do you mind taking a second and just typing that website that you mentioned into the chat? Some of our guests would love to see it.
Yeah. There you go, bestplaces.net. What's cool is you can punch in how much your current salary is. You could use city where you're at, city where you want to go, and hit go, and it'll tell you. Sometimes it's spot on. I've found it to be a little bit off at times, but as far as shot across the bow, cost of living comparisons to see if whatever numbers that you're talking with in your personal circles, it's been a good resource to kind of help bring that together. So.
When you're talking to folks about moving here, do you talk to them about housing? Is that on the docket?
Housing, yeah, definitely. Housing is a big concern in the North Country, not just in the Tri-Lakes area, but just across the entire area. Like one of the big companies I work with is a manufacturing startup in Potsdam, and there's universities all over the place, which is great if you're like a single person looking for a place to crash. But if you have a spouse and kids or pets, the rental market is really tough. So it's one of those things that we need to, as a community, it'd be great if we could just get more, but unfortunately that's not the case. So that's something we do talk about a lot, and making sure that we have an idea, at least a pathway going forward. There are some good resources in the North Country too to help identify that, but it's one of those conversations that I would suggest kicking off sooner than later, because it would really be tough to land on everything you're looking for and find out that you have no place to live.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that's exciting for at least a few of the business owners that are going to be showcasing in the next program is there is an apartment or house attached to the business, which happens a lot in the North Country, right? You kind of live and work in the same place. So for some folks, that might be a way to get housing in the mix, which is kind of a nice bonus. So, so I think we'll be excited about having some of those opportunities for folks to talk about too. So for more, we have this upcoming speed networking session at the next bit. How would, for folks who are going to be attending, they'll get pitched a bunch of times by a whole bunch of different business owners, and then have the opportunity to ask them questions. If you were in these folks' shoes, what kind of questions would you ask?
First thing I would ask myself, is this an opportunity that I would be passionate about every day? And if the answer is probably not, then that's probably not the opportunity that you should really be focusing on. I had a boss once that told me, if you have 3 bad days in a row, it's time to make a change. And I think that that's true. And if you don't want to put yourself in that position where you're going to have consistently bad days. So I would first do the mental check. Is this something that sounds exciting to me? And if the answer is yes, then I think it's worth having a conversation about. Also, I had another supervisor once told me, don't take the job for the money. Take the job. If you work at what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, although it sounds totally cliche. Make sure it's something that you'd be passionate about doing. Because if you come in, if people visit your place, your establishment, and you're miserable, they're going to see that. They're going to feel that as soon as they enter your organization. So you want to make sure that while you're there, it's going to bring you joy. And if those opportunities don't really check those boxes, it's probably not where you want to spend your time.
Yeah, right. So one last question for me, and then I'll stop talking because everyone's heard enough from me today. But taking over an existing business in a small community may be a little bit different than in a more urban area. Everyone will know your name within a week. How might an aspiring entrepreneur set themselves up for success to become part of that community that they would like to buy a business in?
Ooh, great question. The communities up here are very welcoming. I'm originally from Michigan, and to be honest, I've never even heard of a Michigan hot dog until I moved here, which is kind of weird. But I found the community to be very engaging and very welcoming. There's a lot of opportunities to just get involved. The Chamber of Commerce, as Dani and I are both part of the Chamber board. That's just one of many different organizations up here that you can get involved in and really immerse yourself in the community. And it's one of those things where in the North Country is a very, very caring place. And I think once you get out and people know who you are, it doesn't take long for people to really seek you out and want and deliberately find you to give you business, give you the opportunity to earn their business. So.
Oh, absolutely. Although if you volunteer for one thing, you get asked to volunteer for 50 others. That's for sure. So folks, I'm sure we got questions. Who's got a question for Joe? Let's hear them. Come on, we got one. I know we do in there. You don't even have to say it out loud. You can just write it in the chat box. All right, well, I'll ask one while you're thinking of them. One of the things that we talked about a little bit before in kind of getting ready for this interview was asking a business owner, what does your ideal Successor accomplish? And oh, good. Now we can just get rid of my question and ask one from someone else. Perfect. Throwing it out. Joe, what's your geographic scope of work? Where do you work?
So I am home-based in Saranac Lake. I do focus most of my efforts on a crazy startup launching out of Clarkson's incubator campus called LC Drives. I focus a lot on, my background's always been high-tech manufacturing, which is kind of interesting, but I have found myself doing a lot more work in the scientific market, a lot of pharmaceutical testing, a lot of civil engineering and like architectural type roles have really been popping up a lot. Those are really the main ones up here. But then again, I'm a little bit removed from other industries. I know there's a lot of moving parts up here. There's many industries that we just straight up can't find people. It's just they're markets that I don't service myself. Yeah, but that would be, so geographically, to answer your question, the Tri-Lakes are definitely a place that's expanding. There's a lot of really good things happening, in Saranac Lake and Tupper Lake. Potsdam is growing immensely. Plattsburgh, I've really focused my efforts up north. Not to say that there isn't much happening down south. I just can't speak to that.
Sure, yeah. I think that leads to the next question. What do you see as the fastest growth occurring in the region in terms of job openings? Like, what else do you see outside of happening?
Oh, that's another good one. Honestly, I think it's gonna, if I'm speculating here, so
we won't put you on the record. It's not recorded. It is recorded, but that's okay.
I think that, and I'm speculating here, but I think that with all of the pandemic lifestyles changing, I mean, you can't find a pair of cross-country skis in the North Country because everybody's heading out. So I think that going forward, we're going to start seeing a much more even like recreational, I don't want to say just recreational based, because I think that's what everybody counts on, but I think we're going to find that there are more people that are going to be interested in visiting and really embracing more of an outdoor lifestyle. I think that's an area where we're going to see a lot of market growth. I don't think it'll be just like one employer who's just crushing it. I think we're going to just see sustained growth across the board. With that being said, I do think that there's a lot of manufacturing that's moving to the area. I mean, just looking at the transportation clusters across the North Country, I mean, you have, Volvo has a huge plant in Plattsburgh. Bombardier has a plant there. Norris Titanium, where I was for years, has a plant. There's like 13. I think there's like 30 subsidiaries that actually support those businesses, all manufacturing based. Wabtec is a huge powerhouse in the rail industry. They're in Plattsburgh now, and with our cross-border, back when we could cross the border, but the cross-border commerce, just, I mean, being in the North Country, you have access to inexpensive border crossings. You also have access to big water, so any kind of commerce supply chain problems that many organizations face, the North Country is really in a great spot to overcome those easily.
That's awesome. One question about your own journey from John Fox. What was the most important thing that you didn't think of when you moved to the area?
That is a good one. So yeah, I would say just how dynamic you have to be. I was a spouse in tow coming to the North Country, and my background was working on large electronic systems on yachts, and there's not really a lot of large boats in the Adirondacks, so I had to pivot pretty comfortably and quickly to make a go of it. And so I think that the biggest thing I learned is that if you're dynamic in your skill sets and honest with yourself, this is a great place to be. But if you're being uncomfortable for a short amount of time, it's going to be a challenge. And I think that anyone who's looking at moving here should really take a deep look at that, and also conversation with your immediate family, and to make sure that everyone's going to be comfortable with that. And as long as you're willing to step into the unknown a little bit and kind of embrace change, it's an awesome opportunity.
What kinds of opportunities do you see for data science in the Adirondacks area? Are most small business owners satisfied with existing software resources for tracking the results of sales, marketing, or internet efforts? That's a question from Shayna.
Yeah, that is a good one. Those organizations that are large enough to have, like, I'm just trying to think on my experiences working with international manufacturers. Big companies have their own in-house people, Those that don't, a lot of times they don't really know what they're missing until someone shows them. So I think that there is an opportunity for that, but it might be kind of challenging to get into just one role. I do think that that's another role too, that there's a lot of remote possibilities with that skill set. So you know, if you're dynamic and ambitious, I think that there's opportunities there.
Shayna, send us an email afterwards. We have some folks that are kind of in that industry that you might want to talk to. Shoot me an email, transitions@adirondack.org, and we'll connect you with some folks to ask that question to, as well. So I think this will probably be our last question or two, so that we can wrap up. We're going to wrap this one up a little bit early, so that we can get ready for that speed networking session. So let's go to Mary Godnick. Agriculture has been noted as the strongest growing sector in Essex County, but close to 70% of ag businesses operate at a loss each year. Any tips on how those interested in growing the local food systems can look to find both profitable and fulfilling opportunities?
Oof, that is a tough one. I wouldn't even begin to be able to help that one. I do know that the local the farmers markets are a big place to go there. I mean, the big ag, I'm not really sure, but the farmers markets, I mean, every year, the farmers market here is just, it gets busier and busier. And it started out as just a market. Now it's more like a festival every weekend. So I think that is a good place to focus, but I'm not, I mean, I'm reaching. That's a lot of my.
Yeah, that's great. Mary, send me an email, transitions@adirondack.org. We'll get you connected to our local food systems coordinator, Adam Dewberry, Dr. Adam Dewberry here at ANCA, and we'll get you to have a conversation with him. I bet he'll have a lot of insight into that to help you out. All right, last one. Drum roll, please. What can you recommend for the mid-30s, early 40s demographic who want to remain in the area, want to raise their family here, want to keep their jobs, but who lack significant liquid assets because of the stage of life? Student loans, childcare costs, mortgages, increased cost of commodities, etc. Oh, they're speaking our language, Joe.
I know. I resemble that remark. I would suggest, and this is going to sound silly, but right now money's relatively cheap. If you want to make a move, now is a great time, just because the market is really beneficial for lenders right now. So, or not lenders so much, but people who want to borrow money. And there's a lot of resources out there to help facilitate that. And I would suggest that being in that market myself, just go for it. There's going to be a risk there, but if you bet on yourself, you will not let yourself down. You remove all obstacles when it's you. That is, there's no one to blame at that point. So, yeah, I would encourage you to. I mean, and I mean, Dani, you know more than me on the opportunities there for financing, and the Small Business Development Council also has some great resources as well.
So if you are looking to take over an existing business, definitely try to show up to the Friday night program focused on financing and some creative ways to get financing that way. So we'll have a more in-depth conversation about that. We'll also talk a little bit about sort of financial empowerment and literacy opportunities for that, to improve your credit and things like that, that we have programs for through some of our partners like the ADC, the Adirondack Economic Development Corporation, and others. It's a challenge. Like, no one is. It's a challenge, right? And I don't think we should sugarcoat that, but I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And I think this conversation needs to keep going. You know, it's one of the reasons that we're starting the down payment assistance funds, but it's also, you know, that's not going to help everybody. So we need to come up with more and creative and collaborative ways to make sure that we can help everyone to take advantage of the economy as we move forward. There is one last question. I will sneak it in. Joe, do you think you can answer it in 2 sentences or less? Is there an affordable housing issue in the North Country for current employees or transfers?
Yes. I think there is. But like I said, I mean, depending on what your needs are, there's definitely resources out there to help you out. So, you know, and I would encourage you to reach out to. A lot of times realtors don't dabble much in the rental market. A lot of them, well, some do, and those that don't could definitely point you in the right direction. So there are opportunities there. I do know that and it's an issue that communities are really starting to laser focus in on, because they know that this is a barrier for a lot of development in the communities. So I do think that it is an issue, but I do think communities are aware of it and are working really hard to come up with creative solutions.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, we cannot thank you so much for your time. Thank you enough. I am going to thank you. We're going to thank you so much for your time and your insights. And, you know, if you want to be the last word in the chat to put in your contact information and if folks want to follow up with you, that would be great. I'm going to give the sort of necessary closing remarks. Please stay tuned. It's the same Zoom link. So you're going to get kicked out of this session, but if you just hang out in the waiting room, you'll be able to jump back in for the speed networking session coming right up. And if you meet a business owner that you want to talk to more, there are appointments available for Friday night and Saturday morning for one-on-one conversations. The link to sign up for those appointments will be in the chat now and in the chat later during the next session. Appointments are limited. Each business owner only has 2 10-minute time slots. So make sure if there's somebody you want to talk to, you do it right away. That doesn't mean you can't ever talk to them again, but those are the ones that are in the conference. So feel free to sign up for those. Links in the chat to check out the business opportunities and sign up for an appointment. If you attend the Saturday brunch session or set up one of those one-on-one appointments, you'll be entered to win a regional experience package, mostly in the Ticonderoga area, but it's going to be great. You'll win something. That's great. You didn't even pay to come here and you could come away with something. That's great. We also have been using some open source music in some of the videos